Well, thank you. It is good to be back here. It's my second time here. I was with you guys last year. It was wonderful. Thank you to Eddie Fulmer and BamaCarry for the invitation. I tell you what, it's been a pleasure working with you guys alongside of you on certain issues. It's been wonderful. In fact, we've been working together on a very important legal case, and I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But first, you might remember a lot has happened since, if you were here last year, a lot has happened since that time. Of course, the meeting was in early February, and shortly thereafter, there was a tragic shooting in Florida. There were some other high-profile shootings throughout the country, and of course, you know, if you've been watching the news, you know the left has been making an incredible push for more gun control at the national level, at the state level, all around the country, and they're trying to convince the nation that there's, you might call it a new kind of manifest destiny taking place, right? Or at least a liberal version of it. You know, it's the idea that they are on the right side of history, that they are going to win because the advance of gun control is inevitable and unstoppable. This is what they want to sell to you. But they want to convince you that you are losing your rights. And so they're going to give you story after story to try to dispirit you. Well, I want to tell you why they're wrong. They are so wrong. In fact, they're, you know, you might say they're high as a kite, because they're totally off on this. But they don't like being told this. You know, I was interviewed by a reporter recently, and she wanted to, and this was her main question, you know, since the Parkland shooting last year, was 2018 a good or bad year for gun rights? In fact, it was her contention that it was a bad year for us, a bad year for gun rights. And so I told her straight up, I said, look, with the exception of Florida, we saw the blue states get bluer, passing more gun control, but the red states getting more red, loosening restrictions on firearms. I said there was no popular mandate during the past elections for gun control. Well, she just about fell out of her chair on that. I mean, and we went round and round on this because she wanted her story to make the point that Parkland changed everything, that it ignited a change, and that now the nation is getting more and more anti-gun. So I told her this. I said, look, every month, and maybe some of you have seen this, Gallup publishes a poll. Every month they ask Americans, what's the most important issue facing the country? Well, last October, which was the last month before the election, the need for, or the desire for more gun control was not even in the top 15. In fact, I told this reporter, I said, look, 3 times as many people said that media bias was a bigger problem than the need for more gun control. You see where I'm going with this? So I told her, I said, based on this survey, if you're going to make the argument that there's a popular mandate for gun control, then look out, because there's a much stronger mandate for restricting the First Amendment and restricting your job. I just kind of paused for dramatic effect, and she chuckled and she said, touche. You see, the left wants to dispirit you. They want to make you think that you're losing. They want us to think that we've reached a tipping point where the American people supposedly wants more gun control, where we supposedly want the Second Amendment repealed. And so what the left is doing is they give us a constant litany of examples. You know, every time, you know, there's a fake poll published, you know, the anti-gun media gives us that. They broadcast every anti-gun rally that takes place in the country, even if only 5 people show up for their side. You know, every time a liberal state passes some liberal, you know, anti-gun measure, of course they're going to, you know, broadcast that, shout it from the housetops. And this is the proof that they claim that we're losing. But see, the truth is actually far different. We're actually, and this is what we're actually seeing, and this is what I pointed out to the reporters to make the point that no, actually that the red states are getting redder. Yes, blue states are getting bluer. But here you go. You've got the number of school districts. Last year, the number of school districts arming teachers doubled. I mean, you can go back 20 years or more. There have been districts around the country where teachers could be armed. But in less than 1 year, the number of counties allowing or the number of districts allowing for armed teachers doubled in less than a year. That's very significant. That wasn't shouted from the House Tops by the liberal media. Last year, after Parkland, more states passed stand your ground laws. More states expanded concealed carry. More states defeated red flag gun grab laws. I'll talk about that in a second. More states defeated those laws than actually passed them. And now most recently, we got the 15th state that became constitutional carry. That's South Dakota. We got to get Alabama in that list. Come on, guys. But did you see the mainstream media making a big deal about South Dakota becoming the 15th state? No, we didn't, right? Because see, they want to dispirit us. That's their whole point. So whenever, New York passes something radical, they're going to tell you about it. But when South Dakota doesn't, you just see a little blip and then, on to something else. That's not that interesting. But see, the truth is we're actually winning this war for our rights. Now, that's no reason to rest on our laurels. It's no reason to be lazy. I mean, we need to stay active. We need to keep fighting. And at GOA, we, as you guys know, those of you who are members, we try to make this very easy for you, right? You go to our website at gunowners.org. You can sign up there at the top of the page to receive free email alerts. And then we alert you when legislation is coming down the pike that would threaten our rights, or like what we were doing in South Dakota recently, when there's good legislation that needs to be supported, then we rally the troops as well. But see, that's how we're going to win this battle for freedom. It's by staying active and staying engaged in the fight. Now, speaking of the fight for our rights, the biggest battles that I think we're going to be facing this year, and I kind of alluded to it already, that's the red flag gun confiscation orders, which they're trying to pass in Congress. And in every state of the union, I'd be surprised if Alabama doesn't at least have a bill to deal with that. If you're not familiar with those bills or laws, this is what they do. They allow for your guns to be confiscated, even though you haven't been convicted of a crime, even though you haven't even been accused of committing a crime. There simply needs to be the claim by maybe a family member that you are dangerous, in their opinion, and you have guns. That's all it takes. Now, you know how a law like that, just hearing that, how that might be abused, right? Right? Well, we've already seen how this has been abused. In Maryland, around the holidays, there was a family argument. Where hasn't there been a family argument around the holidays, right? Well, a distant relative wanted to get revenge after the argument. So she filed for a red flag gun confiscation order, which Maryland has, against the one that she'd been sparring with. Well, police showed up at Gary Willis's home at 5:17 a.m. in the morning. Why they do that to Roger Stone and others so early in the morning, I will never know. But if somebody, you guys are gun owners, and gals, that was generic, you're gun owners, right? If somebody in the dark is banging on your door early in the morning, and all you hear, you don't hear police, you just hear shouting, how are you going to answer the door? You come with a cell phone in one hand and a gun in the other hand, right? I mean, just for safety purposes. Well, that's what Gary Willis did, and he's dead. Police shot. I mean, it may have been a misunderstanding, who knows what, I wasn't there, but this is a huge problem where due process is being thrown out the window. And the first time that you ever find out that there's been this order issued against you is when they show up at 5:17 a.m. in the morning demanding your guns. Well, his niece, one of his nieces who was there at that family dinner, was just dumbfounded. She said, my uncle wouldn't hurt a fly. She said that argument was just family being family. And yet now we see it cost him his life. That's all it takes. It's just one family member filing that complaint. We need to defeat these bills, not only in Congress, but all around the country and in Alabama as well. Of course, it's a lot easier to defeat these bills before they become a law than when you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, right, in court to try to strike it down. And yet sometimes that's what we have to do. So GOA is fighting a lot of legal battles right now. With the addition of 2 Supreme Court justices that are pro-gun, they had a pro-gun history when they were at the circuit court level. We feel that we have this opportunity, a window right now, to challenge laws at the Supreme Court, gun control laws. And so currently we're involved in 3 huge cases. One of them, as I mentioned, with BamaCarry, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But with the first one, the Supreme Court actually recently, you may have seen this in the news, they just voted to hear the case. We're part of we're helping to challenge New York City's very draconian gun control laws. And this is a case that has huge ramifications for other states, because if the Supreme Court follows the Heller decision, the McDonald decision, and says that you have to stick to the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, well, then there's a lot of unconstitutional laws and a lot of unconstitutional judges' decisions that are in jeopardy. So that would be a good thing. By the way, this already happened after the Heller and McDonald cases. Once the Supreme Court ruled on those cases, there were cities that repealed their gun bans. There were states that repealed their bans on concealed carry. I wish it was constitutional carry, but they repealed their bans, and so now all 50 states have some form of concealed carry. So good things happened after the Supreme Court weighed in 8 to 10 years ago. So, this is a window, again, we may not have forever, so this is a huge opportunity that we have right now. So that's our first case. Our second big case right now that we're involved in is one that we're currently appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. Gun Owners of America is defending a disabled veteran who really got reamed by Eric Holder's Justice Department. Jeremy Kettler is this veteran's name. He refused to pay the $200 tax on a suppressor that he had bought pursuant to the laws of his state. Kansas law says that any suppressor that is made in the state and stays in the state is exempt from federal law. So, yeah, pretty cool, right? Kind of sounds like what happens in Kansas stays in Kansas. Hey, if it works for Las Vegas, why not for the Jayhawks state, right? That's what I say. Well, this is actually a very important law. We helped push that law into law there in Kansas, and we've helped push it into law in other states as well. And we want to see other states, even Alabama, pass a Second Amendment Preservation Act. So we think it's very important to defend this law. Anyway, because Kettler was relying on Kansas law, he purchased a suppressor in 2014, but he didn't register it with the ATF. And believing he was following the law, which he was, state law, he posted a video about his new suppressor on Facebook. Now, in retrospect, that maybe wasn't the wisest thing to do, because somebody at the ATF saw that, and the ATF swooped in, and, but here's the crazy thing. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands who hasn't paid their taxes, but, if you theoretically were not to pay your taxes, IRS would send you a bunch of letters, and eventually they would probably garnish your wages. I actually know people that have had that happen to them, like Wesley Snipes. And well, actually, he went to jail. I do have some friends that have a little bit of experience with this. I mean, they don't break into your home. They just, they'll eventually garnish your wages. Well, not Eric Holder's ATF, no. Not when it comes to gun rights. Rather than just simply requiring him to register his suppressor, they wanted to prosecute him, make an example out of him, to scare anybody who would dare resist federal power on guns. And so Jeremy Kettler, sadly, was indicted. He was convicted of possessing an unregistered suppressor, and now this disabled veteran is a federal felon. So we're defending him. We're not only defending him in an appeal to the Supreme Court, we're actually challenging the very core of the National Firearms Act. Gee, wouldn't that be a shame if the NFA just crumbled to the ground as a result of this case? That would make a lot of us happy. So again, here's this open window that we have now with 5 Supreme Court, 5 pro-gun Supreme Court judges. So we're hopeful that if the Supreme Court grants cert in this case, that we'll be able to get his felony conviction overturned, but also that we get a whack at the NFA, and all in the process being able to uphold Kansas's law all at the same time. So that's an important case that we're involved in. That's our second case right now. Our third big case is the one that we're involved with BamaCarry, where BamaCarry is helping us with this. We're suing the ATF over their regulations banning bump stocks. Now, I would venture to guess that in a room like this, probably most of you get it as to why this would be an important fight. But if anybody's thinking, what's the big deal about bump stocks? They're dumb novelties anyway. What's the big deal? Consider these points. First of all, the ATF ban, not only does it violate federal law, it violates even previous ATF rulings. I mean, this rules that a piece of plastic is a machine gun, which is incredibly ridiculous. I mean, that's like trying to ban smoking by saying a cigarette is a stick of dynamite. It's just ridiculous to make this claim. But think about how dangerous this is, because if government bureaucrats can turn on a dime and ban something that even they themselves for years has said is legal, then think about what's next. Will ammo be the next thing on the chopping block? Firearms, certain firearms, pistol braces, or just, you fill in the blank. What's next on the chopping block? I mean, the principle behind this ruling of theirs jeopardizes all of our rights. I mean, this is very dangerous. So that's one big problem with this bump stock ban. But here's an even greater problem, I think. The language is so incredibly broad, it threatens AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles. All of you know a machine gun. You pull a trigger back and it continues to discharge rounds through the barrel until either you run out of ammo or you let your finger off the trigger, right? Well, now ATF through these rulings is saying that a bump stock literally turns an AR-15 or other semi-automatic rifle into a machine gun. They're claiming that the piece of plastic itself is a machine gun, and it converts an AR-15 into a machine gun, which, of course, is, just defies logic, because obviously the trigger is still moving back and forth when you're using a bump stock. One bullet for every pull of the trigger. So think about this. What happens with the next anti-gun administration? Let's say it's the Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Are you losing your lunch yet? Trump has already banned bump stocks unless we're successful in the courts. And yet there's all these other items that are out on the market that can easily bump fire or be used to bump fire an AR-15. Things like rubber bands, belt loops, fast finger. See, if bump firing an AR-15 turns it into a machine gun, then according to the ATF regs, here's the problem. The next anti-gun administration is going to have a choice. Either ban rubber bands or ban AR-15s. Which one do you think Kamala Harris will choose? Right? See, this is a huge problem. But, even in addition to all of this, think about it. This ban is violating our Fifth Amendment protection, the takings clause, because there's no grandfather clause here. If you own one, you've got to get rid of it immediately, or else you face a $250,000 fine and 10 years in prison. This is very dangerous, and that's why GOA has made it a priority to file this lawsuit. We've also, in addition, filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, which means that that could get the whole enforcement of it stayed pending the litigation. Our hearing is scheduled to take place within a month, not as quickly as we would have liked, but you can only push a judge so hard, and obviously it's up to them when they set the hearing date. But we have filed this lawsuit in Western Michigan, which, believe it or not, in that circuit is a very pro-gun circuit. which has actually also shown its willingness to push back in many areas against government excess. So we're very hopeful for a good result in this case. So if you want to keep tabs on it, follow us at Gun Owners of America on Facebook, on Twitter, sign up for our email alerts, and you'll be able to stay up to date on it. And also thanks again to BamaCarry for assisting us in this very important case that really is dealing with a lot of important principles. Because we've got to stick together. All different groups like ours. You guys working at the state level and us mostly at the federal level. We got to stick together because certainly the anti-gun left is doing that. I mean, they're singing off the same sheet, and you know how they work it. They point to tragedies, they pounce on tragedies like the school massacre in Santa Fe, Texas, or Parkland, Florida. But you know what's interesting about that? You know what all those places have in common? They're gun-free zones, right? I mean, what a difference if one of us had been there. Like somebody said earlier, this is the safest place in Alabama today, right? Here's the thing, though. Good guys with guns are stopping mass shootings from coast to coast. Good guys and good gals. Of course, you don't see CNN reporting that, the Clinton News Network. They don't report on these stories. But we see it again and again, right? Last year, 2 armed good guys shoot and kill a gunman who opens fire in an Oklahoma restaurant. A firefighter, before that, stops a potential mass shooting at a South Carolina school. A doctor ends one at a Pennsylvania hospital. A husband on a date with his wife, stops a mass shooting in a Texas bar. An Uber driver in Chicago, of all places, stops one on a busy street corner before anybody can be injured. And this is one of my favorites. A woman worshiping in a Colorado church with a concealed carry firearm mortally wounds an armed invader who had 1,000 rounds of ammunition strapped in. He was intending to commit the greatest mass shooting on American soil, but not one person was killed inside of that church other than the bad guy. That's how you get it done. So those are just a few of the examples from all over the country. I mean, guns, as you guys know, are saving lives every day. So this is why we have to work so hard to preserve our Second Amendment protected rights. I mean, we cannot compromise. We cannot settle for gun control light. The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. It doesn't say you can have a background check, right? It doesn't say you can have a waiting period or that you can have a ban on bump stocks or have a Hughes Amendment or an NFA. See, our rights don't come from government, right? They don't come from popular opinion, thank God. They don't even come from a piece of paper like the Constitution, as good of a document as that piece of paper is. That's not where we get our rights. No, our Declaration, our founders hit the nail on the head. Our rights are endowed to us by our Creator. They come to us from God, and that's why they can't be taken from us, and that's why we cannot compromise. Not at all. So this is one of the reasons why GOA is fighting so hard against any and every bit of compromise in Washington, even on issues that might at first seem like, what's the big deal with a bump stock? Well, no, there are some huge issues underlying. So I hope, I know many of you in this audience have signed up with GOA, and I want to thank you. The more people we have here, the louder voice we have in Washington, D.C. We are fighting for your rights. We're fighting for all of our Second Amendment protected rights. I want to just end with this. I mean, my time's about up. So I just want to encourage you, because it's easy to think the anti-gun left is this insurmountable wall. They're so big, how can we possibly win? But I want you to know that they actually fear you more. President Clinton lamented several times that passing gun control cost him control of the Congress. And why did that happen? Because we held congressmen accountable and we fired them in droves during the '94 elections. More recently, President Obama whined that his greatest frustration was not passing gun control, and he said this several times. But why couldn't he? Because congressmen feared that we would hold them accountable at the polls. Well, a couple of years ago, a very liberal magazine, the Daily Cost, said this: "It's the gun owners of America that keeps the left awake, clutching their comforters in fear." I love that. But see, here's the point. It's not Eric Pratt that they fear, it's you guys that they fear. The left fears you. They fear the power of the grassroots, because that's what Gun Owners of America is. That's what BamaCarry is. The left fears you. So be encouraged, folks. This is a good day for liberty. Thank you, and may God continue to bless this nation.